Is your HOA always this fair? Her notice slapped the windshield paper crack under the porch glare, claiming my brother's work truck was scheduled for removal. She mocked due process and tried to tow it anyway, stamping a fake timestamp and pushing a tow order she thought no one would question. But the badge on his desk clicked shut, radio snap, and the red tape glow shifted when her personal email order surfaced on record. Anyway, next week, the clubhouse went silent, and the posted notice told the whole neighborhood she'd finally been stopped. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee and the feeling that the morning was supposed to be boring. The cul-de-sac was half-awake sprinklers ticking a lawnmower, complaining somewhere in the distance that damp smell of cut grass hanging low over the asphalt. Then I saw the paper. It was shoved under the wiper blade of my brother's truck dead center on the windshield. The white sheet was so bright against the glass it almost glowed. As I walked down the steps, the security light over the community boathouse across the little lake flicked off, leaving its reflection faint on the truck's hood. The only thing really lit up now was that page. Big block letters across the top, HOA notice, Pier 1207. Underneath, in red, attempt removal scheduled. My stomach went cold. I got close enough to smell the wet metal and cheap toner. The notice was clipped under the wiper so tightly I had to work it free, careful not to tear the corner. Someone had taken their time. In the upper right corner, a neat little line of type read, Filed 03:17 p.m. Office entry, K. Miller. President. Of course she signed it, I muttered. Right on cue, the gate at the front of the subdivision gave a short electronic beep that drifted down the street. A second later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the push notification from the community app, Camera 02 Access. HOA, President, badge scanned. She logged herself in to drop this, I said, under my breath. Tom, a voice called from my left. I looked over. Henderson was on his porch, one hand on the railing, the other wrapped around a styrofoam cup. He didn't come down. He just stared past me at the truck. "You got a notice?" he asked. I held it up so he could see the red line. "Apparently, we've been upgraded to attempt removal scheduled." He let out a low whistle and shook his head. "She's doing it again." "Doing what again?" "Picking a vehicle, making up a story, trying to scare somebody into moving it," he said. "Last year it was the guy with the plumbing van. Before that, the retired electrician." I glanced back at the truck. It wasn't pretty, but it was legal plates, current inspection sticker straight, nothing leaking onto the concrete. Toolbox bolted across the bed, padlock dull with age, but solid. Every line of it said, "Working man, not junk." "This is Mark's work truck," I said. "It sits here when he's between jobs." "That's it." Henderson shrugged with one shoulder. "Doesn't matter to Karen. She doesn't like seeing tools where she thinks Alexis should be." I unfolded the notice all the way. The language was as stiff as the paper. This document serves as formal notice of an attempted removal action on the vehicle located at 214 Harbor Lane. Reason: unauthorized storage of commercial equipment on residential property. Status: scheduled for enforcement in accordance with HO 1207 of the Shelby Pines Covenants. At the bottom, in small print, was a little black square, the kind you see on menus nowadays. A QR code. "Great," I said. "Now she's got digital threats too." "Let me see that," Henderson said. I stepped closer to the property line and handed him the page. He didn't have to squint at the signature block. "That's Karen's signature block," he said immediately. "She loves that stupid hook on the K, makes it look like she's closing a deal, not signing a notice." 03:17 p.m. I repeated, tapping the filed time. "You see any tow trucks around 3 yesterday, Buh?" He took a sip of coffee. "I did see one around 11 at night, though. Same company she used when she tried to drag off Mike's plumbing van. Rolled slow through here, stopped by your driveway for about 10 seconds, then kept going." 10 seconds isn't exactly attempted removal," I said. "Doesn't have to be, not the way she plays it," Henderson replied. "She just needs enough noise to justify paperwork." A low rumble made both of us look down the cul-de-sac. As if the morning wanted to prove his point, a white tow truck with a familiar logo drifted past the intersection engine, idling low. The driver glanced our way, then kept going toward the exit. "Same guys I asked." "Sure looks like it," Henderson said. They know the drill. She calls, they circle. She files something, they wait for the day somebody's not home. I looked back at the QR code. You ever scan one of these, I asked. Not on purpose, he said. Why? Because if she's calling this an attempt, I want to see what she's trying to build behind it. I pointed my phone at the code. The camera focused with a soft click and a small link slid up from the bottom of the screen, HOA enforcement portal. Seizure attempt, pending. I tapped it. The page that loaded was bare bones, the kind of thing someone threw together on a weekend and never expected residents to see. At the top, case number SP214TRK. Under that, 3 lines. Status pending. Attempt recorded filed 03:17 p.m. Office entry K. Miller. Next action schedule enforcement window. My thumb hovered over the screen. Anything good? Henderson asked. She's not calling this a warning, I said quietly. She's logging it as an attempted seizure. That's our starting point, not our end. He let out a breath through his nose. She always skips straight to the hammer. I looked from the notice to the truck to the toolbox still sitting there like a dare. No clamps on the tires, no chalk lines. No photographs stuck in the file yet, just her word, a timestamp and a portal she never meant us to open. If this is attempt 1, I said, folding the notice back along its crease, she's not done. Henderson watched me slide the paper into my jacket pocket. What do you think she tries next? He asked. I watched the tow truck turn out through the gate at the end of the street, brake lights flashing once as camera 02 gave another soft beep. If she attempted once, I said, eyes still on the gate, she'll be back with a timestamp she thinks will stick. The HOA office sat at the back of the clubhouse, tucked behind a glass door with frosted lettering that tried to look official management suite. It still squeaked like a closet when I pulled it open. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and cheap coffee. A fluorescent tube in the ceiling flickered with a soft buzz. Buzz casting a faint stutter over everything. File shelves lined the wall behind the front counter rows of binders and boxes labeled in neat block letters. Enforcement, active. Enforcement, closed. Discretionary. That last word bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Karen Miller stood behind the counter like a judge behind a bench. Arms folded blazer, too crisp for a Monday morning in a small Ohio suburb, chin tilted just enough to make sure you noticed she was in charge of this space. Good morning, Tom, she said. Voice smooth as laminate. Here, about the notice, I held up my phone with the PDF of her letter on it. You mean the attempt removal scheduled taped to my brother's truck, or the seizure attempt pending page? You hid behind a QR code. A corner of her mouth twitched. Both then. She reached down without looking and pulled a folder from a stack, flipping it open with practiced ease. On the tab, SP214 TRK. Enforcement. Your brother's truck qualifies for seizure, she said. No hearing needed. The way she said it flat, casual, like announcing the lunch special, hit harder than if she'd raised her voice. From the hallway behind me, I caught a glimpse of Henderson. He leaned against the doorframe outside, pretending to study the bulletin board across the hall. From this angle, I could see his eyes fixed on us like he was watching a slow-motion crash. I looked back at Karen. No hearing needed, I repeated. That's not what R1207B says. She breathed out a little laugh like I'd told a cute story. Most residents don't quote the covenants, Tom. That's why you have it aboard. We manage the details so you don't have to. I stepped closer to the counter, close enough to read the labels better on the shelf behind her. Someone had gone wild with a label maker. Parking infractions past due assessments violation, landscape. 2 boxes on the bottom were marked discretionary. Those discretionary files, I said. That where you put anything you feel like calling an emergency. Her eyes cooled a notch. That's where we handle sensitive enforcement matters, things that if left unaddressed damage property values for everyone. I nodded slowly. Right. Trucks with the toolboxes and driveways. Truly a menace. Her fingers tightened on the folder edge, but her smile didn't move. Your brother's truck, she said, tapping the tab with one manicured nail, is registered as a commercial vehicle. Our rules clearly state that commercial equipment may not be stored in driveways overnight. That's black and white. Then file it as a violation, I said. Fine, us argue about it whatever. But attempted removal is a different animal. Where exactly in Port 112-07 do you get no hearing needed? She held up her free hand in a calming gesture like she was humoring a difficult customer. Expedited enforcement, she said. When a violation is clear and ongoing, the board can move directly to enforcement and schedule a hearing after the fact. Behind me from the hallway I heard Henderson mutter just loud enough for me, "Expired clause." I glanced over my shoulder. He was still reading the bulletin board, lips pressed in a line. That told me enough. "Funny," I said, turning back to her, "because the copy of the covenants I downloaded last night doesn't have anything called expedited enforcement." She tilted her head. "They're updated periodically, Tom. I wouldn't expect you to keep up. 8.2.07b authorizes the board to act when ongoing non-compliance threatens the community standard." "That's not what it says," I replied. "It says, no action to remove shall be undertaken absent a hearing or written waiver unless the vehicle creates an immediate safety hazard. Does my brother's toolbox qualify as a safety hazard now?" Her jaw clenched and released once a small tell. "You're splitting hairs," she said. "We issued a notice. That is the hearing in essence. He can respond by paying the fine or removing the truck. That's how this works. That's not a hearing," I said. "That's you handing down a sentence and calling it dialogue." She pushed the open folder toward me on the counter. Inside was a printed copy of the same notice plus a line item labeled Tow Vendor. Pre-authorization with a blank next to date of enforcement window. "You can argue with me if you want," she said. Voice softening just enough to sound reasonable. "But the options are simple. Pay the fine and store the truck off-site, or we move forward with removal. That's what this says." I didn't touch the paper. "Who authorized the vendor?" I asked. "The board. Or just you?" She didn't blink. "The board delegated enforcement discretion to the president at the last annual meeting. You were there, weren't you?" "I was," I said. "I remember a lot of talk about streamlining processes and reducing delays. I don't remember any vote that said you could skip hearings." Her smile sharpened. "You don't have to remember. The minutes remember." From the doorway, Henderson's voice floated in low and dry. "Minutes say any delegation expires if it's not renewed, Karen." She shot a quick glare over my shoulder. "The public portion of the meeting is over, Mr. Henderson. If you wish to address the board, you can request time at the next open session." He lifted his cup slightly. "Just enjoying the bulletin board." She turned back to me and slid a single-page invoice across the counter. "Here," she said. "Pre-enforcement administrative fee. Pay this within 10 days and we'll suspend the removal order. Leave the truck where it is and the vendor will proceed under the current authorization." I stared at the invoice. There was a dollar amount, a due date, and a line in the small print, "Failure to comply may result in lien." "This isn't suspension," I said. "This is a shakedown with letterhead." "Call it what you like," she said. "It's still your choice." I met her eyes. "I choose a hearing." Her smile came back slow and cool. "If you want a hearing," she said, "gathering the folder, you'll get one." She paused just long enough to make sure I saw the confidence there. "Just not the one you expect." The HOA email hit my inbox at exactly 11:06 a.m. Subject line, "Pending Seizure." Tag, "Apply today." I read it twice, hoping it was some glitch in their mailing list. It wasn't. The sender was the same HOA address they used for holiday newsletters, only this time the preview line wasn't about potlucks or landscaping tips. It was about my brother's truck. I stepped outside into the noon heat phone still in my hand. My driveway smelled like hot oil and cut grass. The compressor in my garage wheezed through its cool-down cycle a steady sh-click that filled the gap between my heartbeat and my thoughts. Then I saw it. A thick orange chalk square drawn hard and fast stamped across the side of Mark's metal toolbox. Not a playful doodle. Not a kid's prank. A tag. The same kind utilities use when they're about to cut a line. Prop number 2. Ran that ROI. Across the cul-de-sac, Don leaned against his truck like he'd been waiting for me to notice. He lifted his chin. "You get that email he called?" "Yeah," I said. Catchy subject line. He walked over, toothpick shifting between his teeth. "She did this with the landscaper's trailer last year. Same chalk, same stunt. Box it, tag it, make it look official until people cave." I scraped a thumb through the chalk. It smeared into a dull smear on my skin. Feels less like enforcement and more like intimidation. "That's her whole playbook," Don said. Before I could answer, a second notification lit up my screen. Unknown sender. Forwarded message. Subject, F.QD. Seizure. Attempt, internal. My stomach tightened. The screenshot was of an HOA internal inbox, Karen's name at the top, and in the middle one damning line, "Push the toe. He won't fight back." Don saw my expression. "Worse than the first one, yeah," I said softly. "A lot worse." A diesel rumble rolled through the street. Both of us turned. The same white tow truck from earlier in the week crept toward my driveway, idling low and slow as if the driver wished he could turn invisible. "Well," Don muttered, "the cavalry arrives." The truck stopped. The driver, mid-30s, calm face, stepped down with a clipboard. "Morning," he said. "You Tom? That's me." He handed me the clipboard. "Work order from Shelby Pines HOA. Vehicle SP-214TRK. Just need to verify location." The sheet was clean, pre-printed professional until the authorization box, AUT8. K. Miller, action, pre-seizure positioning window. TBA, in comments, pending enforcement. Resident has been notified. "Mind if I take a photo?" I asked. He shrugged. "I gotta log the stop anyway." I snapped the pictures. Dawn leaned in. She signed that herself. "Full signature," I said. The driver shifted. "Look, I'm not here to stir anything up. Today's just tagging and documentation." "What time were you here yesterday?" I asked. He blinked. "Yesterday, not at 3, if that's what you're asking. I was on the east side, didn't come through here till after 10. I exchanged a long look with Don. "That notice Karen filed," I said, "claims the attempted removal happened at 03:17 p.m. sharp." The driver lifted a shoulder. "Then her time's wrong. My logs'll show where I was. GPS mileage dispatch pings everything. So you weren't here at 3:17. "Nope, not even close." Don crossed his arms. "There's your crack." The driver walked toward the rear of the truck, clipboard under one arm. Habit must have guided his hand because he reached for one of the small hooks, the kind used to test fit under a frame. He crouched. The hook hovered an inch from my brother's bumper. I didn't say a word, just stepped into his peripheral vision. He froze. He looked up. We locked eyes. A single second, stretched thin. Then he set the hook back on the rack with a soft clink. "No movement today," he said quietly. "Just logging." "That chalk box," I said. "Yours?" He shook his head. "No, that was already there when I passed through last night." She pointed at it like she was proud of it. Don let out a humorless grunt. "Figures." The driver sighed, tapping his clipboard. "Look, I'll note, resident contesting notice. Anything beyond that, you'll need office records. Dispatch logs, every stop. If the timestamp's wrong, the system will prove it." "It will," I said, "and that timestamp is everything." Don lowered his voice. "Fake that, and she's not enforcing. She's manufacturing." I looked again at the chalked box, the hot metal toolbox, the work order with her signature, and the email still glowing on my screen. If the 03:17 time didn't match the dispatch log, the whole seizure attempt wasn't just sloppy, it was fraudulent, and that was the crack in the paper trail I needed. If that timestamp's fake, I said her entire seizure attempt implodes. The driver nodded once, slow knowing, and walked back to his truck. I heard the garage door creak open behind me before I saw him. Mark stepped inside, still in his navy work pants, boots dusty from the road. He didn't say a word at first. He just placed his wallet and keys on my workbench, then set one more item down with a sharp, deliberate tap. His federal compliance officer ID. The metallic seal on the badge caught the low-hanging bulb above us, throwing a thin silver flare across the garage wall. He looked at me. "Who?" he said quietly, cited 41207 without the federal preemption clause. I exhaled long and slow. "Karen," I said. "The HOA president." He nodded once, jaw tight. Then she doesn't know what she stepped into. The garage was dim except for the yellow bulb overhead. Tools hung on pegboard casting long, thin shadows. The orange chalk tag still marked the side of his truck's toolbox, ugly and loud in the warm light. Mark walked to the toolbox, ran his thumb across the chalk square, then wiped the dust on his pant leg. "She marked my equipment," he said. "Did she file anything else?" "An attempted removal notice," I said. "Filed at 03:17 p.m. He paused. 03:17. "Yeah, that's impossible," he said. "The board adjourned at 2:45. They can't file anything after adjournment unless they reconvene, did they?" "No." "Then the timestamp's invalid." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was the kind officers use when they're adding up violations in their head. I pulled the stack of printouts from the bench that noticed the QR code screenshot the tow work order. He took them and flipped through, eyes narrowing. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the HOA internal email leak. I read it aloud. "Push the tow. He won't fight back." Mark's expression didn't move, but something in the room went colder. He walked to the corner cabinet, pulled out a binder, one I hadn't seen him use in years. Inside were printed regulations, training notes, and his old agency manuals. He flipped to a tabbed section labeled A4.0, Federal Preemption. He tapped the highlighted line in 44.3 with his finger. HOA may not override federal preemption. I looked at him. "This applies." "Oh, it applies," he said. "If an HOA action affects federal compliance equipment or a federal operations vehicle, they need documented cause and a hearing. No hearing, no action. And definitely no seizure attempt." He pointed to the notice again. She skipped 5 required steps. "What now?" I asked. Mark pulled his phone and began snapping photos. Notice chalk tag the work order, the email leak. Each picture clicked with the same cold precision. "We put this into the record," he said. "Every mistake she made becomes a documented procedural failure." I grabbed a pen and a stack of sticky flags. "Show me where to mark." We sat on 2 small stools by the workbench. For the next 20 minutes, the garage filled with the sounds of paper flipping, highlighters uncapping the bulb above us, humming faintly. We marked every line. Karen misquoted every missing clause every time her process contradicted itself. Mark circled the 03:17 timestamp and wrote one word beside it. "Invalid." He leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. She cited 412.07 like it's the only rule in the universe. She didn't check for preemption. She didn't document a hazard. She didn't log a hearing. She didn't even get the timestamp right. I set another sticky flag. She attempted seizure not knowing who owns this truck. Mark gave a tired half smirk. "Most people don't read federal manuals." She should have. He stood, stretched, and walked once more around the truck, checking angles like someone reconstructing a scene. When he crouched near the bumper, he saw the faint scrape where the tow driver had almost set the hook. He hesitated, I said. Mark nodded. Because he knew something was off. Drivers know when paperwork smells wrong. I held up the binder. "What do we do with all this?" He took the binder back, flipped it shut, and placed it neatly on the bench. "We prepare a mini-hearing," he said. "A what?" "A small procedural session. Nothing formal yet. But we document every discrepancy. Then we notify them we intend to read this into the record." "Into the HOA record. Into all records," he said. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something other than anger. Something like ground under my feet. Mark gathered the documents into a neat pile, tapped the edges straight, and slid his ID on top of them. He looked at me, voice low but steady. "She thinks she scared us," he said. "But she doesn't know what she stepped into." I nodded. "So, tomorrow," he picked up the ID, clipped it onto his belt, and answered. "Tomorrow," he said, "we put the badge where she can't ignore it." The badge sat in the center of the kitchen table like a challenge. The overhead light hit the metallic seal just right, throwing a hard white glare across the worn wood grain. Everything else in the room felt dim by comparison: the beige walls, the scuffed chair legs, even the old clock on the far wall ticking out a rough, uneven rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. My brother pulled out a chair and sat down opposite me. He slid a yellow legal pad between us, lined up a pen, then nudged the badge forward until it was exactly halfway. "We do this by the book," he said. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. I'd left the pot on too long, forgotten about it when we came in from the garage with our arms full of paperwork. It fit the mood, overheated bitter, around the edges. "Define the book," I said. He flipped open the legal pad and wrote at the top, "Attempted seizure. Shelby Pines, HOA. Vendor logs," he said. "Meeting minutes. Badge scans at the gate. Every time that tow truck moved. If the paper trail doesn't match her story, the logs will break Karen faster than any argument you and I could make." I glanced at the stack of documents on the table. The HOA noticed the internal email screenshot, the tow company work order, the printed screenshot of the portal page. We'd punched holes in the story already. Now we needed to stitch them into something nobody could ignore. "Where do we start?" I asked. He pulled 2 sheets from a folder and laid them side by side. Copies of 812-07. One older, scanned with faint gray text. One newer, cleaned up Karen's version. "Compare," he said. I leaned in. The old version had more lines under subsection B. Removal procedures ran almost a full paragraph longer. There was a sentence halfway down highlighted in yellow from some long-ago training: "No removal shall proceed absent hearing or written waiver, except in the presence of immediate safety hazard." On Karen's version, that sentence was gone. The section jumped straight from notice issued to enforcement scheduled. "She cut the hearing language," I said. "She omitted the hearing language," he corrected. "There's a difference. One is sloppy, the other is selective." He pointed to the top of the page. "See the footer, Revised 2018. Filing error." That means they meant to fix formatting, not substance. She can't rewrite due process by cleaning up the font. He slid those pages aside and pulled the tow work order in front of us. Next he said, "Vendor code." The form had a box in the corner, ENF code 1207BIMP, some internal HOA shorthand. Under that, another line for vendor code. It was blank. "She never filled it in," I said. "Because she doesn't know what to put," he replied. "Proper seizure code needs a hazard reference. She doesn't have one. No leak, no obstruction, no emergency. Just doesn't like the look of that toolbox." The clock kept ticking. Tick, tick. He wrote a heading on the legal pad, "Procedural defects." Under it, he started a list. 1. Invalid timestamp. 03:17 p.m. Board adjourned 2:45. 2. Missing hearing requirement, deleted line. 3. No hazard documented. 4. Vendor code incomplete. 5. Internal email, push the tow. He won't fight back. He tapped the last line. "This one bothers me the most." "It should," I said. "That's the whole game right there." He nodded. "She's counting on you folding. On everyone folding. That's her enforcement model." He opened another folder and slipped in the notice, the QR screenshot, the internal email print, and the work order. On the tab, he wrote in block letters, "Attempted seizure, HOI 214. HOI, I asked. "Homeowner, incident," he said. "It's what we call this kind of thing on my side. You're not just a violator. You're a case with a file number." I watched him work in the yellow light, his pen moving with the neat, practiced strokes of a man who'd filled out too many forms in too many bland rooms. The burnt coffee, the ticking clock, the badge glinting. All of it felt like the quiet before a storm that wasn't going to involve shouting. Just paperwork. "You really think logs from some tow company can break her?" I asked. He looked up. "I don't need them to break her," he said. "I need them to contradict her. Once there's a conflict between her story and the neutral records, every other decision she's made becomes suspect. And then you put it into the record," he said simply. He reached into his bag, pulled out a thin manual with federal seals on the cover, and flipped to a page halfway through. A section heading read, Use of third-party vendors in enforcement actions. He ran his finger down until he hit the line he wanted. Deliberate misrepresentation of time, location, or nature of an enforcement attempt. He read, may constitute procedural fraud when used to justify further action. He looked at me over the top of the page. This, he said, tapping our growing stack, is procedural fraud. Not just bad manners, not just HOA overreach. Fraud. The word landed heavy in the small kitchen. I sat back, letting it sink in. The orange chalk on the toolbox. The smug red letters, attempt removal scheduled. The internal email, he won't fight back. For the first time since the notice showed up, I felt heat under the anger. Not rage resolve. What's next, I asked. Tomorrow, he said, we call the vendor. Nicely. We ask for their logs under your right to information on any enforcement related to your property. Times, dispatch notes, GPS, pings. And if they don't want to talk, someone will crack, he said. A dispatcher, a driver, someone. All I need is one statement that doesn't line up with 03:17 p.m. He closed the folder, squared it against the edge of the table, then rested his hand on the badge. You know, he added, she's built her whole little kingdom on the idea that nobody ever pushes back, that no one will take the time to read the fine print. I looked at the folder, at the list of defects, at the badge between us. Maybe it's about time, I said. He smiled, small, not triumphant, just sure. Yeah, he said. Finally, someone fought back. The clock ticked on. Tomorrow, we'd trade quiet kitchen light for recorded phone calls and vendor logs. Tomorrow, he said, lifting the folder we call the vendor, and someone will crack. The speakerphone gave a sharp little click as the line picked up. For a second, all I heard was office air-muffled chatter. A printer somewhere, the faint whir of a fan. Then a woman's voice came through, cautious but clear. Mid-County Towing Dispatch, this is Carla. I glanced at Mark. He nodded once. This is Tom Fraser, I said. Property owner at 214 Harbor Lane in Shelby Pines. I'm here with my brother Mark. I leaned closer to the mic. This call is on speaker and being recorded into the record. There was a beat of silence. Into the record, she repeated. We're documenting an attempted vehicle seizure authorized under 812-07 by the Shelby Pines HOA. Mark said, voice steady, professional. We're calling to confirm information on your work order, SP214-TRK. The projector in the small clubhouse conference room hummed behind us, casting a dull rectangle of light onto the wall. On it, we'd mirrored my laptop screen. The HOA noticed the work order scan our list of procedural defects. The only other sound in the room was the soft tick of the old thermostat on the wall and the faint buzz of fluorescent tubes overhead. Okay, Carla said slowly. Give me a second to pull that up. Keys clacked on her end. I watched the cursor blink on our own copy of the work order. Mark tapped his pen against the legal pad, then scribbled the time at the top of the page. Vendor call, 10:02 a.m. Got it, she said. SP214-TRK. White pickup toolbox in a bed. Shelby Pines. That's the one I said. We have a notice here that claims an attempted removal was filed at 03:17 p.m. and an order authorizing your company to tag the vehicle. We need to confirm some details. Another pause. All right, she said. I can confirm some things on our side. How did you receive the request? Mark asked. Was it through your standard portal or another method? Not the portal, she said. This one came from, hang on, more typing, direct email. Not the HOA office address we usually see. My eyes met Mark's. From where he asked. From a Gmail account, she said. K. Miller, something. She identified herself as the HOA president. Mark made a small mark on his pad, personal email. So, not the official HOA system, he said. No, Carla replied. She said their portal was still being updated, and she needed an expedited tag. Did she attach any board resolution or meeting minutes? Mark asked. No, Carla said. Just a note that the board supported enforcement and that the vehicle was being kept in violation. Standard description, honestly. I swallowed. Was anyone else on that email? I asked. CC'd, BCC'd. Not that I can see, she said. Just from her to our main dispatch. On the wall, the projector hummed. The glow made the text on our scanned work order look harsher, every line of A.U. Tate K. Miller feeling heavier. Carla Mark said, I'm going to read you the text at the bottom of her internal email we have here. I want to know if it matches anything you recall from your conversations. He read it cleanly. Push the toe. He won't fight back. There was a longer silence. That sounds like something she said on the phone, Carla admitted. Not in the email, but when she called to follow up. She said, he's not going to fight this. Just get it marked so we can move it. So she told you I wouldn't fight back, I said. I don't know you, Carla replied quickly. I'm just telling you what she said. I logged resident unlikely to contest on our side because that's how she framed it. Mark underlined that phrase on the pad. Let's talk about times he said. Our notice says the attempted removal was filed at 03:17 p.m. When did you log your first movement on this case? First dispatch entry was 10:14 p.m., Carla said. Truck left our yard at 10:21, reached your cul-de-sac at 10:47. Stayed less than 5 minutes. No hookup. So, no driver near my property at 3:17 p.m., I said. Nowhere close, she answered. We were across town on a different job at that time. And the work order you're looking at now, Mark said. Does it show any earlier attempt? No, she said. One trip, one tag. That's it. Mark circled 0317 on his pad 3 times. Carla, he said, does your company typically require written board authorization for community-wide enforcement, or is a single officer's email enough? We prefer a copy of some board action, she said slowly, but a lot of HOAs send it from the president. We assume they're speaking for the board unless we're told otherwise. Did Karen send you any board vote, he asked. No, she repeated, just that personal account. And if I told you Mark said that the board meeting that day adjourned at 2:45 p.m., and there is no record of any enforcement action being approved after that, what would that mean for your authorization? She took a breath. I could almost hear her thinking. It would mean, she said carefully, that our authorization depended entirely on her representation. If that representation was false, the order wouldn't be valid under our policy. I felt something in my chest loosen just a little. So, from your company's perspective, Mark asked if there's no board approval, no hazard, and the timestamp used to justify action doesn't line up with your logs. What would you call that? Another pause. Longer. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I'd call that an invalid authorization, she said. We wouldn't have gone out if we'd known all that. Mark wrote it down exactly. Authorization wasn't valid. Vendor. Carla. I said you've been more helpful than you know. Last question, if requested formally, can your company provide your dispatch logs and call notes for SP-214 TRK? Yes, she said. We can send them to you or to the HOA, but we'll note that the request came from the property owner. Good, Mark said. Please send them to both. Transparency helps everyone. She hesitated one more time. For what it's worth, she added, hearing she used our company that way doesn't sit right with me. We don't like being dragged into neighborhood politics. You're not the one doing it, I said. But your logs are about to matter a lot. We thanked her and ended the call. The speaker gave a final soft click, leaving the room filled only with the projector's low hum and the clock's dry tick-tick. Mark capped his pen. Vendor confirms no 317 attempt, no board approval, personal email, and she used that same phrase again. He won't fight back, I repeated. Except you are, he said. He gathered the notes, slid them into the folder labeled Attempted Seizure, and closed it with a flat hand. Tomorrow's hearing, he said looking at the projected notice on the wall, won't go the way she expects. The clubhouse felt smaller than usual, packed shoulder to shoulder, warm from too many bodies and too little ventilation. Voices murmured in pockets around the room, the kind of low hum people get when they're waiting for something they aren't sure they're supposed to see. At the front, the projector washed a pale rectangle of light across the pull-down screen. A laptop idled beneath it, fan humming. The board's folding table sat just beneath the screen, a thin microphone at its center. I stepped up to that table. Then I set Mark's Federal Compliance Officer badge right in the middle of it. The metallic seal caught the yellow overhead lights and sent a glint across the room. Several people stopped whispering. A woman in the back straightened in her chair. Even the old HVAC unit seemed to quiet for a beat. Karen stiffened at the opposite end of the table. She clutched her HOA binder with both hands, knuckles, pale lips pressed thin. Her eyes moved from me to the badge to the crowd, calculating angles she could no longer control. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Henderson entered, wiping his palms on his jeans before taking a spot along the right wall. "She can't dodge tonight," he said as I passed him on the way to the mic. Karen struck first. "Thank you all for attending," she said, tapping the mic hard enough to make it pop. "We'll proceed through regular business quickly so we can address an unresolved enforcement action." No one cared about the agenda. No one cared about landscaping schedules or pool hours. They were here for one thing: the truck incident. When she finally reached new business, she exhaled sharply. "Item 7, she said. "Violation citation under HEDAR 12-07 involving a commercial vehicle stored on a residential driveway." A dozen people glanced toward me. "The resident may speak," she added. 2 minutes. I took the mic. "I won't need 2. I clicked the laptop. The screen filled with the HOA notice in giant projected clarity. Date filed, circled in red. "This is the notice placed on my brother's truck," I said. "But this," I pointed to the red circle, "is the part that matters. Filed 03:17 p.m. Murmurs rippled. The board adjourned that day at 2:45. There was no reconvening, no emergency session, no authority to issue anything at 3:17. Slide change, projector click. The HOA minutes appeared beside the vendor dispatch log. At 3:17 p.m., I continued. Mid-county, towing wasn't even on our street. Their first movement was 10:14 at night. Mark leaned toward the mic. "We disclosed the call was being recorded," he said. "Everything you're about to hear was provided voluntarily." He tapped play on his phone. The recording echoed through the room. Authorization wasn't valid. We didn't receive anything from the board. Only from Karen's personal email. A few gasps cut through the dead air. Karen's face pinched. "That recording she snapped is taken out of context." "No," I said. "It's taken directly from the vendor." I clicked again. 2 versions of HEDAR 12-07 filled the screen. Old on the left corrected one on the right. The original rule says I pointed to the highlighted line, "No removal shall proceed absent hearing or written waiver." I moved my hand to the right. Karen's version distributed in violation notices cuts that line out. Someone in the second row said loud enough to travel. She removed the hearing requirement. Mark stood beside me, steady as stone. "And federal preemption," he added, clicking to the next slide showing the single bold line restricts HOA authority over federal compliance vehicles or equipment. Karen's binder dropped onto the table with a frustrated thud. "This is a community meeting," she said. "Not a trial." "These are your rules," I replied. Another board member, a woman with a clipboard full of sticky notes, leaned toward her mic. "Karen, did you authorize the tow yourself?" "I acted within my discretion as president," Karen said. "That's not the same as board approval," the gray-haired board treasurer said, "and you know that." The murmurs grew louder, anger, surprise, recognition of a pattern. I clicked one final slide, forged timestamp. Hearing. Clause removed. Unauthorized vendor order. Silence followed, heavy, waiting. Then the treasurer lifted his mic. "I move," he said, to dismiss the violation against 214 Harbor Lane, void all associated enforcement actions, and open an internal investigation into President Miller's use of HEDAR 12-07. "I second," the sticky note board member said immediately. Hands rose across the table. Karen's did not. "Motion carries," the treasurer said. A low wave of reaction swept the room. Not applause, but the beginning of something like it. I leaned to the mic. "And the tag on my brother's truck, remove it." restore his property, clear his record. The treasurer nodded. And return his truck, he repeated formally tonight. The pole light buzzed faintly above us as the last few board members filtered out of the clubhouse. The night carried that early spring chill light enough for short sleeves, cold enough to remind you of the hour. Across the lot, Mark's truck sat under the yellow glow toolbox, polished clean, tag-free, untouched. Someone had removed the chalk tag completely. The metal on the side panel looked almost new, the kind of shine you only get after someone decides to put things right. The bulletin board near the walkway now held a crisp white notice. Fresh staples glinted at the corners. Work vehicles welcome due process updated. Revised procedures posted. Vendor restrictions clarified. Hearing. Clause reinstated. A quiet ripple of disbelief moved through the handful of residents standing nearby. A couple read the sign twice as if it might vanish if they blinked too fast. Mark reached the truck first and brushed his hand over the toolbox. "Feels strange," he said. "Like they scrubbed away more than chalk." "It's the first clean thing this HOA has done all week," I said. The clubhouse door squeaked open behind us. Henderson stepped into the pool of light, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked like a man who'd watched a fault line finally shift. "They posted that sign just minutes after the vote," he said. "Didn't even wait for the crowd to clear." "That's new for them," I said. A couple more neighbors drifted over faces we'd seen at the mailbox line at the annual BBQ at the pool gate. One woman crossed her arms and stared at the truck like she was expecting to see handprints from the attempt earlier in the week. "So it's over?" she asked. "Like..." "Actually, over seizure attempt voided," I said. "Logged as improper. Vendor authorization invalid. Timestamp rejected." She let out a breath that was half relief, half anger. She made it sound like she could do whatever she wanted. To any of us. That was the idea, Henderson muttered. Keep folks rattled, less likely to push back. The man with paint on his boots from earlier appeared again, stopping just short of the truck. "What I want to know," he said, "is how in the world she picked this truck to mess with." Mark stayed silent, letting me answer. "She thought it was easy," I said. "Wrong guy, wrong truck, wrong paper trail." He cracked a grin. "And here I thought she ran the neighborhood." "She ran the part no one bothered to question," I answered. "Until tonight." Behind the clubhouse windows, the board silhouettes moved around, clearing the last stacks of paper off the tables. The treasurer stepped outside, loosening his tie. He looked tired, deep tired, but clearer than he had in weeks. He approached us without ceremony. "We owe you transparency," he said. "We let procedural shortcuts slide. Tonight made it very clear we can't do that again." Mark closed the badge case, the silver emblem disappearing behind leather. "It wasn't about authority," he said. "It was about what the rules actually say." The treasurer nodded. "The board will be meeting again this week. Vendor policies are changing. Notice procedures, too, and minutes will be posted accurately effective immediately." "And?" Karen Henderson asked. "Interim review," the treasurer said. "No more unilateral decisions. Everything moves through the board from here." He left us to the parking lot, walking toward his car like a man carrying both relief and responsibility. A small group of neighbors gathered near the bulletin board, now whispering, pointing, discussing. The word hearing clause floated back to us. Then timestamp. Then personal email. The pieces were spreading. "Feels like something shifted tonight," Mark said. "It did," I replied. You could hear it in the room when the recording played. Mark leaned against the truck, arms crossed. "Funny thing," he said. "I didn't need to flash the badge, just put it on the table so she couldn't pretend the rules meant nothing." "Sometimes the symbol is the shove," I said. The man with the paint boots called over, "She ever going to try that again?" I shook my head. "Not after tonight, not after everything went into the record." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd been waiting years to believe. More residents drifted our way. Some wanted details. Some just wanted to say they were glad someone finally didn't fold. A few looked at the cleaned-off toolbox like it was proof that the ground rules had changed. One woman stepped forward, hands stuffed in her hoodie pockets. "So what happened in there?" she said. "How'd it turn?" I pointed at the truck. She tried to seize the wrong one, I said, because she didn't know who was behind it, because she thought nobody would question a forged timestamp. Mark tapped the edge of the toolbox. She counted on silence, he said, and that's what cracked. The crowd around us felt different, looser, lighter, steadier, like a neighborhood remembering it still had a voice. I took one last look at the board's new notice, the bold letters catching the pole light. Work vehicles welcome. Henderson gave a short laugh. Now that's a legacy. Mark opened the driver door, paused, and looked back at us. Well, he said, one thing's sure. I finished the sentence for him. Finally, someone fought back by the book. He nodded, and the night felt clean. The posted order on the clubhouse board glinted under the pole light, and the clean shine on my brother's restored toolbox felt like the final seal on a long week. I realized the real win wasn't just getting the chalk tag removed, it was seeing a crowd gather around that updated notice reading their own rights out loud like it finally mattered. Due process had been put back in writing, and the neighborhood felt steadier for it, proof that even small systems can be pushed back into shape. Finally, someone fought back by the book. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.